Thank you for your generosity. In my childhood, I knew 3 grandparents, 3 great-grandparents, and many great aunts and great uncles. We regularly went to visit these people, and eventually we, all of us, including children, attended their funerals. I knew early on what to me at that age were old people died. We had goldfish and cats and dogs and chickens, a rabbit and a pony in my childhood. Goldfish turned belly up in the bowl. Cats ran out onto the highway and were killed by cars. Dogs and the pony eventually died of old age. My father dispatched chickens into the freezer. I knew that animals died. But then when I was about 9 or 10, a little girl about my own age, whose family belonged to our church, but who did not regularly attend, died of a brain tumor. It was the first it began to dawn on me that I could die at any time, not just when I was old. Perhaps it made even more of an impact because I had been in the hospital myself over my 9th birthday to have a bone tumor removed from my right leg. I didn't really understand words like benign and malignant, but I knew my parents were worried. They did not know my tumor was benign until it had been removed and biopsied. A new concept began to take shape in my child brain. Anyone could die. Everyone would die. Speed forward 11 years or so, and I am in my, maybe a little more than that. I'm in my first year of seminary, studying for the ministry. I'm going to school and working as an assistant to a hospital chaplain at a general hospital. There are only the 2 of us to serve the whole hospital. So the chaplain asked that I concentrate on the cancer and cardiac patients. It's 1981. These are the people most likely to die, and many of them do. One morning in that year, I wake up with a strange but strong premonition. This is the day that I will die. I can tell myself it's just because I have been around so much death. I'm making this up. But the feeling is so strong. I begin to think, if this is the day I am to die, what should I do? I could drive home to Pennsylvania and tell my family I love them, but I've been there recently and I've just told them I love them. I could stay in bed for the day, but you can die in bed as well as anywhere else. Finally, I decided to do what I would normally do on that day. I got up, got ready, went to work. I obviously did not die, but I learned something. I learned that I was in the right place doing the right thing. Even if it was the day I was going to die, I was going to do exactly what I was doing. And that was reassuring knowledge. It's a couple years later, and I've graduated. My parents are accompanying me to my new home, a United Methodist parsonage in Weatherly, Pennsylvania. As we pull up to the side door, I can hear the phone ringing. I run in and answer. It is the wife of the previous minister. There's been a death in the congregation. Do I need him to return to officiate, or can I take the funeral? I tell her I will take the funeral. I have 3 funerals in the first month of my first ministry. My sister says I must have a very sickly congregation. I tell her, Connie, the youngest one of the three of them was 86. I learned to sit and listen to family of those who have died. I begin to learn not just about death, but also about loss and mourning. One congregant lost her baby girl a year earlier to a heart defect. She has not touched a thing in the nursery. I do not know how to help her. It is appropriate to mourn, but she is allowing this loss to devastate her life. I am a 24-year-old pastor who does not know what to say or what to do. 7 or 8 years later, I am in the process of switching denominations. I need to belong to a Unitarian Universalist congregation as a member for a year. And so I do a year-long clinical pastoral education residency at a general hospital. Unless I am on call on a Sunday, I'm free to attend services. My first day on call, not a Sunday, but a weekday, I am called to the emergency room, a crib death. I do not respond well. My cousin has just lost her first baby. When the family's priest arrives, I flee. My supervisors have to walk me through how I might have responded more pastorally and better. I do learn, but the calls I dislike most in that year are the ones to OBGYN. I can see healing, though, even in attending those deaths. The mother of a young mother who has just lost her baby is sitting with her. The nurses bring in the dead infant for the mother to hold. They take a picture for her to keep. The grandmother remembers how when she lost a baby many decades earlier, she was never allowed to hold the baby, never even allowed to see it. She expresses thanks to the nurses for their care for her daughter, and she seems to have some healing for her own past loss as she sits there with her daughter. After my year of clinical pastoral education, I serve a small Unitarian Universalist congregation as they begin their search for their first called minister. One of my members comes to me. He belongs to my congregation. His wife belongs to a synagogue. They have just lost a baby. His wife needs a ceremony, something to mark their child's brief life. But her rabbi has said the baby did not live long enough to need a funeral. The husband asks if I could officiate at some ceremony. Yes, yes, I could. I wrote a poem for that ceremony that I still have, in memory of Eric. Red and wrinkled, they come out from the womb. Are they newborn, or is the world? The universe changes with their birth. 1,000 promises lie within the child. A day, a year, a score, 70. With what measure of life will they grace us? How many smiles, how many tears will one life evoke? New life dawns, shining as briefly as a firefly, or as long as the summer sun. It shines, and there is light. When a child died when I was a child, I learned that I could die. When I witnessed the death of children as a young adult, I learned how hard that kind of loss can be. Even as I sat with a 90-year-old by the bedside of her dying 70-year-old daughter, I knew how much pain there is in seeing your child die before you. There are other things I have learned about death. Sometimes our own minds betray us. They tell us that dying would be better than the pain of living. Back when I was doing that residency year of clinical pastoral education, I had 2 units on which I concentrated my work. One of those units was the psychiatric ward. Now, one of the rules of chaplaincy is that you work with a patient from within their faith tradition. You don't try to convince them of yours. But what does one say to the person who says, "Heaven is a beautiful place. I just want to go there and be done with this world and its pain"? You know it's part of the depression, the illness that makes the person feel that way. But somehow it also seems that their religious beliefs are pushing them closer to suicide rather than away from it. In one congregation I visited several times with a member who was in and out of mental hospitals for his severe depression. Often I visited him along with his mother. I knew that her greatest fear was that she would eventually lose him. I was at General Assembly, our denominational annual meeting, when I received the call. He was gone, jumped from a bridge. I returned home early. Years later, my now ex-son-in-law's father also jumped from a bridge. My son-in-law does not practice any faith, but his family is Roman Catholic. My grandsons were little, and I went along to the funeral in case they got too restless and needed to be taken out of the service. I was a bit worried about a Catholic service for a suicide victim, but it was fine. A deacon officiated as the priest was away on a mission trip. He very purposely told my son-in-law's grandmother that the church used to say that those who committed suicide would not be allowed into heaven. He said they'd learned things since then. Depression was an illness. He assured her she would see her son again in heaven. The organist at the service played Deep River, which is a song I love. I did not think at the time how cruel that might have felt to others. I don't understand an illness that turns your own mind against you so that you become the instrument of your own death. I do know that depression and addiction, which often comes with it, little self-medication, run in my family. My mother gave my brother, sister, and me a serious talk about cancer being in the family and told us to make sure we were regularly checked. She did not give us the same kind of talk about depression. Perhaps she did not know how or what to tell us. Facing death through much of my life has been real. I've been with the dead and the dying and those left to mourn. But sometimes we play games with death. What would be the worst way you would want to die? For me, it would be to be eaten alive by another animal or to die in a fire, simply because both seem like they would be particularly painful ways to go. Although I suppose surviving a fire might actually be more painful than dying in one. But growing up as a woman, the danger that was most impressed upon me by those around me was not the danger of carnivorous animals or fire or flood, but of men. My first job in my teens was at a sandwich and ice cream shop at a local shopping plaza. Employees were to park at the far end of the mall parking lot, leaving the front spots for shoppers. My grandmother regularly told me to not get into my car before I checked the back seat to make sure that no possible attacker was lurking there. Occasionally, such dangers became more than imaginary. In my 20s, my mother told me that Donna, a girl who lived a couple miles down the road from us in my childhood, and with whom I would occasionally play, had been killed by her boyfriend. When I went to a friend's wedding with my own boyfriend shortly after breaking up with him, he acted crazily on the way home, driving erratically and going right past my house. He did eventually take me home, but when I discovered no one else was there, I went to my grandmother's. I also did not want to be on the list of those killed by boyfriends, husbands, lovers. I was afraid he would come back and did not feel safe. I hate horror movies. I do not want to be entertained by violent deaths. So often those who do like them will say to me, "But you know it's all fake." Except that I know that though the movie may be fake, violent deaths are not. In the 200 to 300,000 years of our human existence, why have we not been able to eliminate murder and war? To die in an avalanche, to be eaten by a lion, to die by flood or landslide are all violent. But why do some of us die by the hands of others of us? That seems particularly cruel. On the Buddhist website, Lion's Roar, it says that Maranasati, also known as mindfulness of death or death awareness, is a Buddhist meditation practice in which one aims to keep death in the forefront of thought. Such contemplation of death awakens us to the present moment, fostering a greater appreciation for life itself. I hope that that is what I have been about as I reflect with you on death in this sermon today. May our contemplation of death awaken our compassion for ourselves and for others. Unitarian Universalist minister Mark Morrison Reed wrote, "We are all dying, our lives always moving toward completion. We need to learn to live with death and to understand that death is not the worst of all events. We need to fear not death, but life, empty lives, loveless lives, lives that do not build upon the gifts that each of us has been given, lives that are like living deaths, lives which we never take the time to savor and appreciate, lives in which we never pause to breathe deeply. What we need to fear is not death, but squandering the lives we have been miraculously given. So let me die laughing, savoring one of life's crazy moments. Let me die holding the hand of one I love and recalling that I tried to love and was loved in return. Let me die remembering that life has been good and that I did what I could. But today, just remind me that I am dying so that I can live, savor, and love with all my heart." Our closing hymn is 205 in the Gray Hymnal, Amazing Grace. I invite you to stand as you're comfortable. Please remain standing for our closing words, our challenge.